Today on Trial Watch, it was the nastiest Palimony case in history, and the entire world watched them slug it out.
He just, he's mucking around with the conception of my son. He's making up.
Sandra Jennings talks exclusively to Trial Watch about her ex-lover, movie star William Hurt, the man who done her wrong.
The old saying goes, don't get mad, get even. And that's just what Richard Villa did. The object of his vengeance was his own father.
And then a beautiful young wife, two jealous brothers, the bitter struggle for a $1 billion fortune. It all simmered at a fashionable ski resort and exploded into murder. All this next on Trial Watch. Real people, real trials.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Weller, along with co-anchor and attorney Lisa Specht. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Rob, and hello to you all. Welcome to Trial Watch.
Well, she was a gorgeous young mother, adored by everyone who knew her. He was an heir to a $1 billion fortune. Together, Eva and Sam Schoen lived the good life in the exclusive ski resort of Telluride, Colorado. But beneath the tranquil surface, a vicious struggle was raging over which son would control the family empire. Their own father blames his children for the tragedy which followed. But the victim of all the violence and greed was the gentle, innocent Eva.
On the morning of last August 6th, Espen and his 9-year-old sister, Benta Schoen, woke up to find their mother, Eva Schoen, heiress to the U-Haul fortune, murdered. Family and friends were shocked. Who would have killed this loving wife and mother?
Eva was a warm, loving woman who was a wonderful mother and very dedicated to her family. She had a sense of communicating a real love for the land here and for the beauty, and had a kind of a lovely peacefulness about her.
Eva was a very beautiful person, a very beautiful woman. She was Norwegian. She had a lovely accent. She was a very gentle person, a very kind person.
She had a kind of a, I won't say it's simple, but a pure way of going at life. There was unmanipulative. There was nothing, she had no hidden agenda, you know. She wasn't playing any games. It was kind of refreshing and nice. I enjoyed that.
No one seemed to have a motive to kill Eva, yet whoever did went to great lengths to locate her home.
You may have noticed by the different turns we're making that someone who isn't familiar with the area or doesn't have directions might have quite a difficult time trying to get to the residence.
That night, Eva's husband, Sam Schoen, was away on business. Eva's 2 children were asleep downstairs when the killer struck.
They went in and went upstairs into a bedroom where Eva Berg Schoen was either sleeping or she was awake, and shot her. They left without taking anything from the residence. There was no evidence of sexual assault, so it brings us to the conclusion they went in for one purpose.
Neighbor Jenny Josie was leaving for work on the morning of August 6th when she heard the Schoen children yelling to her.
And at first I thought they were just calling my name, and it turned out they were calling, I think my mom is dead.
The children kept talking about whether it was a dream or not, that they kept pinching themselves to make sure this was really happening to them. It seemed so bizarre and unreal that it could actually be real life going on right then.
Some feel the murder is linked to the long-running family battle over who will control the lucrative U-Haul company. In fact, Leonard Schoen, founder of the U-Haul family fortune, believes his own sons, Mark and Joe, are responsible. He thinks they conspired to kill their own brother, Sam Schoen, and Eva was killed by mistake. For his allegations, Leonard Schoen has been slapped with a libel suit from his sons, Joe and Mark. Even with the libel suit pending, Leonard Schoen spoke with Trial Watch.
I believe that this thing was motivation behind this, or the impetus behind this was either one of my 2 sons that presently are in charge of the organization. I believe that they either created an environment in which substantial people around them thought that the best way to ensure their welfare and everybody's welfare would be to get rid of Sam. And I believe that the killers came up here. They didn't have any intention of killing Ava. I believe they came up here to kill Sam.
Joe and Mark refused to talk to us on several occasions. But in an effort to counter their dad's accusations and to find Eva's killer, they hired private investigator John Sellers, which stirred controversy with the San Miguel Sheriff's Department.
I know there's been accusations that we're a small department or don't have the experience in homicide investigations, but when it comes to rules of evidence, crime scene investigation, interview techniques, we do have the experience.
The local sheriff's department has made some headway with their investigation. They have hairs, fingerprints, and some microscopic evidence which could lead to the killer. There's also a $250,000 reward offered for information leading to the arrest of the murderer.
With the reward out there, there's a possibility that somebody might have seen something and might call with some information.
In a town where most people still leave their car doors unlocked and their windows open, Eva's murder has affected everyone.
I guess in Telluride, you kind of feel protected. You feel like we live in this safe little enclave that the rest of the world can go by and it doesn't really affect us, and things like that don't happen here. And it did happen here, and it happened next door to us.
Imagine Leonard Schoen's pain as he looks at two of his sons, his own flesh and blood, and accuses them of being involved in Eva's murder.
We'll be keeping you up to date on the investigation into Eva Schoen's killing.
Well, next on Trial Watch, celebrities in the law. Sandra Jennings is still trying to hit William where it hurts. But will the courts continue to give her the big chill? An exclusive Trial Watch update. In the beginning, they made love. At the end, they waged war. Academy Award winner William Hurt dumped his live-in lover, Sandra Jennings, the mother of his infant son. She turned around and sued him for alimony and child support. In an exclusive interview, Sandra Jennings told Trial Watch that's when things really got nasty.
I'm angry. I'm angry because I feel that from the beginning this judge was prejudiced. I mean, the first thing she said when we originally went into court to my other lawyer was, not to my lawyer, but to his lawyers, oh, what movie was he making at that time? And they said The Big Chill, and she says, oh, that's one of my favorite movies he's in.
This judge was so starstruck and so madly in love with this witness, Bill Hurt, that we never could have gotten a fair shake from the beginning.
The beginning was a heated, sometimes vicious public trial that lasted just 6 days in June of 1989.
There isn't a word that I spoke at the time that I remember, okay?
Sandra Jennings, a former dancer with the New York City Ballet, was in court claiming that her 5-year relationship with actor William Hurt constituted a common law marriage, that she gave up her career because of it, and that therefore she was entitled to half of his estimated $10 million fortune. On the witness stand, Hurt adamantly rejected the claim.
You never used the word marriage as a word to describe our relationship on any level.
Bill asked me 3 months before I conceived Alex to have a child with him. When I was 4 months pregnant, he handed me a prenuptial agreement, which he had never even mentioned to me before, which was completely unfair, I thought. At the time, I was pretty devastated by the whole thing.
Jennings claims she eventually signed the agreement, and that, in fact, they had been living together in Hurt's New York apartment since the fall of 1981. Then, in January of 1983, Alex was born. But little more than a year later, the love affair soured.
And I packed my bag, and I was going to leave, and he threw my suitcase at me, and he said, you don't have to leave. I consider us married. We're more married than most married people. We're married in the eyes of God, and this is when the marriage took place. And the fact that we signed a prenuptial agreement also is, which unfortunately was lost or destroyed by Bill's attorneys or Bill himself.
Hurt vehemently denies the existence of any such prenuptial agreement, and he says he never intended to marry Sandra. In court, his testimony was often angry and defensive.
What you just said is an insult to me, you understand? Okay? I can't hear anything else.
Let's go on to another question, sir. Let's relax. You want to move?
He just, you know, he's mucking around with the conception of my son. He's making a what am I doing?
Let's not talk about Alex.
Insulting little joke about it. You understand? And
Richard.
I'm what he's, you know. Mr. Hurt, just tell me if you remember. I don't remember anything right now. Right now, I'm very angry.
Take a 10-minute recess. I feel that Bill Hurt is a damaged person, and that the judge somehow sympathized with that and had a lot of empathy for him. And she didn't seem to have any sympathy or empathy for me. She was completely involved in what I would call his con, his performance in the courtroom.
Factually, the whole trial came down to whether the judge believed Sandy about what happened in South Carolina or believed Bill Hurt.
Although Hurt and Jennings lived in New York City, Sandra based her lawsuit on the 10 weeks she spent with her ex-lover in South Carolina during the filming of The Big Chill. South Carolina is one of the 13 states that still recognizes common law marriage. New York does not. But in the end, it didn't help Sandra's case at all. Judge Jacqueline Silberman decided in favor of Hurt.
There was hard documentary evidence that the court didn't consider in the light we believe it should have considered and found for Sandy, that all of these things were indicators that there was a common law marriage between Sandy and Bill during the filming of The Big Chill.
Women have got to stick together and realize that if we get into relationships with men and men tell us we're married, then we have rights.
Palimony is a relatively new concept for the courts and still fairly controversial. To help us understand more about love and the law, one of the nation's top palimony experts will join us when Trial Watch returns. Palimony. It's alimony for live-in lovers. Some lovers get it. Sandra Jennings, William Hurt's ex, didn't. With me today is attorney Bruce Clemens, perhaps the top palimony lawyer in the nation. And Mr. Clemens, what do you think about the outcomes of the Jennings-Hurt trial? Do you think that this outcome in any way signals some kind of change of attitude on the part of the courts?
There's not a change in attitude, and it's not good news. The courts are giving us the same message they've been giving us consistently for the last 15 years. If you expect the benefits of marriage financially, you've got to be married. If you're living with somebody, your agreement has to be written. It has to be clear.
So then in the Marvin versus Marvin case, with Michelle Marvin suing for palimony, that's the first big case. What happened in that case? In other words, most people think, gee, that established this great precedent. She got rich off of that case. What really happened?
She ended up with substantially nothing. She established the principle that people living together, if they had an agreement, could enforce that agreement. But it's tough to win those cases, and she ended up with nothing.
By the way, what can a woman who is living with a man do to protect herself in these cases? I mean, this doesn't apply just to celebrities. There are a lot of real people out there living together in those kinds of relationships. What can they do?
Well, the protection comes from a whole series of gets. Get your name on title to the house. Get your name on joint bank accounts. If you have an agreement, get that agreement in writing. If you can do it, get married. If you can't do any of those things, then get ready to consider the possibility that you may not have anything financially if the relationship ends. And if you can't live with that, get out.
So you think that a woman should see a lawyer, get an agreement, get this thing drawn up in writing if, in fact, she and her friend don't want to get married for some reason?
It's vitally important to have it in writing. Without a writing, it's too likely that the claim of a verbal agreement won't be accepted by the courts.
Do these cases, are they very frequent? In other words, we hear about celebrities, but this is your practice. Do you get a lot of normal people filing these cases?
They're still rare to have palimony cases filed and going to court. And the celebrity cases are really just a small fraction of all the cases. The cases that have merit and that move along usually are 10, 20, 30-year relationships. Sometimes in probate court, one person's died and the person who lived with them learns for the first time they don't have rights to those assets unless they can prove an agreement. Those cases have some chance of success, but overall, the chances are very poor.
And what about common law marriage? That's kind of related to the palimony issue. How many states still have common law marriages?
I think there's about 7 states that have common law marriage. It's hard to prove it, and if you're not living in the state that has the common law marriage, you're just visiting it for a short time, you're going to have a difficult time in your non-common law marriage state proving that and establishing a marriage.
In terms of the Marvin case and palimony, do you think basically people are going to stop bringing these kinds of cases to court?
They haven't been bringing them in great numbers before. There'll always be a few, there've always been a few, but they don't pay off generally. And I don't think you'll see any upswing in the numbers, but there'll always be a few.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens, for being here with us today and sharing this information. Good information to have. And we'll be back with more Trial Watch in just a moment.
The love affair is over, but the malady lingers on. That's why a nurse at Johns Hopkins Hospital sued her ex-lover, a heart specialist on the same ward. Now, no, he didn't leave her with a broken heart. The good doctor left her with a case of herpes. She sued him for $10 million, saying the doctor should have told her he had the disease as well as the desire. Now, the doctor claimed the nurse dated him at her own risk, so she couldn't sue him for giving her herpes. Now, a federal court showered the nurse with tender, loving care. The judge agreed that the doctor should have told her he had a contagious disease before they had sex. And the judge said the nurse had every right to sue for emotional distress and fraud. Lisa?
She had every right to sue, and we'll have to find out if she actually recovers. Now, next up, we've got Election Day turned out to be Judgment Day for one reluctant father. Leo Villa was running for judge in Southern California. He had a good chance of winning until his son objected on moral grounds.
Richard Villa is a successful computer book salesman and Leo's illegitimate son. He was born 34 years ago and raised alone by his mother.
Leo Villa abandoned my mother and I when she was pregnant with me, totally denied I could be his, lied under oath in court to try to get out of child support back when I was 2 years old, and then over the next 17 years, only paid $60 a month.
Leo Villa met a 19-year-old Richard only once while trying to get out of those $60 payments in court.
That day in court, my father entered the courtroom, my mother pointed him out, and I walked down the aisle and walked over to this man, put my hand out and shook his hand and said, "Hi, I'm Richard, your son." And that's the last we've ever spoken.
The man who would be judge didn't even speak to Richard when his son started to campaign against him.
I just could not believe that this man with lack of morals and lacking of character could judge others.
Richard posted 400 of his own signs next to his dad's, urging a no vote on Villa. His father's supporters tore many down. But in the end, Leo Villa lost and his son won.
Well, for the past 34 years, I don't think my father has thought much about me. Actually, in one case, he didn't even know my name. I'm pretty certain now that he does think about me, and he will remember that his son is Richard.
Leo Villa will certainly remember his son Richard now. Leo finally admits he made a mistake 34 years ago, and he says he made a second mistake too, running for judge.
Now, you know, Lisa, I can't help but think that if Leo had just taken his son out for a cup of coffee somewhere along the line and said, "Look, let's talk about this. I don't know if I'm really your dad or not, but let's just sit and chat about it," he would have kept his son from campaigning against him. He probably would have gotten out of the argument and probably would have won the election.
So what's the moral of that story, Rob?
Go out for coffee.
More often.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
All righty. Now, this trial caused a royal pain in Santa Ana, California. We're going to now test your understanding of the law. Every day, Lisa is going to give you the facts of a thorny legal case. Then you be the judge and match your decision with the court's. Nancy Rosen Carter was fighting her husband over the custody of her child. During the hearing, the judge, Robert Monarch, called Nancy a Jewish American princess. Lisa?
Well, Rob, she felt the judge should be disqualified from the case because he was prejudiced. The judge said the term princess doesn't refer to any one religion. Instead, it describes someone who behaves like a pampered brat. That's not very flattering either. Besides, he said, he himself was Jewish, so he couldn't be prejudiced against Nancy Carter. What do you think? I'll tell you what the appeals court decided when Trial Watch returns.
So, the saving grace here is that he's Jewish.
So, should Judge Monarch be disqualified from hearing a trial because he called one of the participants a Jewish American princess? Yes, that's what the appeals court said. They said it doesn't matter how innocently Judge Monarch may have used that term, it is still a negative one. So Nancy Rosen Carter gets a new judge in her child custody case.
And that is today's Snap Judgment. Did you agree? Thanks, Lisa. Well, that is it for today. Join us again tomorrow for Trial Watch. Real people, real trials.